Just back from Bradford, city of culture, of course.
Mm.
And we were at the National Science and Media Museum, which is reopened in January.
That's good.
But the sort of big stuff that's going to be happening there under the theme sound and vision is not going to be happening until later. So um, the David Hockney exhibition is happening, and the Wonder Lab is open. But the main things that partly coincide with City of Culture, not yet there. So I shall return to the National Science and Media Museum.
So how later is later? When's that? When's
Put it
that going to
this way,
happen?
the young gentleman I spoke to couldn't give me a precise date on this,
Oh dear.
but it is happening. It is happening.
Yeah, yeah.
Just in the meantime, make the most of enjoying David Hockney, which is looking at well, a couple of the more in the keeping with when it was the National Museum of Film Photography and television, and looking at when Hockney was doing his photography, that he would do the multiple images, that technique, and then later when he did use the filming to make pieces out in the wolds. So it's looking at his use of technology. So that's in keeping with where the exhibition's on at, and I imagine that's going to run throughout the City of Culture event.
Why is it that in recent years, City of Culture
Mm.
has sort of involved a sort of feeling of you've opened the building, but you're still painting the rooms when the crowd are coming in? City Culture always ends up feeling like a bit of a, rush job.
Well, I mean, the only thing I'm going to say on that is that let's remember it's a 12-month run, and I know they've had plenty of build up to it. And of course, the other example is the Bradford Live building, which is the former Odeon Cinema, and it's looking
Mm,
next door to the Alhambra, which is a wonderful
yeah.
building in its own right. It's a magnificent, but typical of Bradford, it's another huge, magnificent building. And it's kind of on the cusp of opening, but I don't know the date of when that's going to happen either. And there's no information actually attached anywhere to say when it's
The
opening.
pattern there. Yeah, there's a pattern.
So there's signage up that goes through and plugs who now runs it, the Trafalgar Group. So it's going to be obviously beholden on the Trafalgar Group as to what happens into when Bradford Live will open. But it does look magnificent from the outside. It is wonderfully restored. So as it stands at the moment, Graham, for this festival, it's keeping an eye on things. And
Mm,
strangely enough, I didn't find a brochure anywhere while I was in Bradford. And
right. Oh, good.
I'm not wanting to in any way cast
No, let's not go there, Charles.
nasturtions on this one.
We're
Um,
both Yorkshiremen. Well, I'm nearly Yorkshireman. You are a Yorkshireman. So yeah, let's not like it's only February. Let's not like do this of culture in too much.
I mean, we will return to it as and when actually it returns to us. So we'll keep
Exactly.
an eye on that. So maybe rather than looking to the present and the hopeful future, let us go back in time, Graham, if we may, for our first subject tonight. The Mystery of Rock and Roll and Jim Jarmusch's 1989 film Mystery Train. Just fill me in, first of all, on the background of that film, how and where it came in Jim Jarmusch's career. How is it seen as a kind of landmark film in his career? And also, of course, the part of your corollary question to that is the mystery of rock and roll and how it's presented within it.
Yeah, well, Jim Jarmusch is a really influential film director.
Yeah,
If you think about all the great American indie films of the 90s and noughties that ended up getting Oscar nominations,
yeah,
they all owe a huge debt to, first of all, Jim Jarmusch, who first made an impact with Stranger Than Paradise in 1984,
yeah.
and then Down by Law in 86, both of
Mm.
which I think
This was a kind of triptych film, my memory is. Um,
that's true.
three stories in one.
Yeah, it starts off with a young teenage Japanese tourist couple arriving by train in Memphis who
Yeah,
are huge Elvis fans. And the first one's quite sort of like very quiet, dry humor. It's about culture clash between Japan and America
mm,
and the sort of nature of hero worship. And it's all very sort of like gentle and light. It's certainly not a biopic like A Complete Unknowner. I
no,
Walk the Line, that's for sure.
no, no.
And as usual with Jarmusch, you think, well, nothing much is happening. But that's because his style is low key. And just because the style's low key doesn't mean to say there isn't a lot happening in the plot.
Mm.
and there is happening a lot happening in plot, and it all comes together on a single night with three different stories where the characters are subtly linked between each of the stories, and as the stories develop, they get more serious as they go along, and it's just wonderfully done, wonderfully acted by Joe Strummer and Rufus Thomas and Screaming Jay Hawkins, and in the process, it becomes greater than the sum of its parts because it hasn't got that many rock and roll songs in the soundtrack. It's not trying to tell you what rock and roll is in a conventional sense.
Mm.
You know, there's the usual quite a lot of long pauses, silences, lots of space in the film. It's not telling you what to think. It looks cool, great characters, some nice, crisp, dry dialogue.
Mm.
It's not telegraphing what it means. But if you actually think about what's happening in the story and what the characters are doing, what the film is rock and roll. So the reason rock and roll was fantastic in the 50s and had such a big impact wasn't just because it was exciting or had good tunes or Elvis looked great. It was the songs were about real things in real life.
Yeah.
And it was about the real lives of outsiders, especially black people. It was a rebellious form of music
Mm.
with something to say about American society, albeit in a, you know, punchy, humorous, usually non-intellectual fashion. And the stories that are in Mystery Train are the sort of events that rock and roll's about. So the final story with Joe Strummer, it ends up with like shooting someone and robbing somewhere and getting chased by the police and drinking too much and falling out with his girlfriend and in playing pool in a drunken fashion in a dive of a bar full of black people. And so the film Mystery Train is rock and roll.
Mm.
It's not trying to be. It's not trying to tell you what rock and roll is. It itself is the essence of rock and roll.
I mean, bearing in
That's
mind,
why it's
Graham,
a
that's
great
being
film.
made in 1989,
Mm.
and we're talking about 50s rock and roll. Why make that film in 1989?
Well, I suppose in the 80s, the mainstream music scene was, apart from U2, was mainly glossy and synth based and
Yeah,
Cyndi Lauper and
yeah.
Madonna and George Michael and bit of Guns N' Roses. It
Mm.
was all, very very non rock and roll really.
Mm.
So I think Jim Jarmusch, who is a rock and roll fan,
Yes.
was looking back nostalgically to when rock and pop was meant something.
Meant something.
As opposed to just being brash and gaudy and entertaining.
I mean, that's certainly probably its most visceral and exciting function when rock and roll first broke through. That it was exactly that. Um, there comes a thing with any rock era where you refract everything that's happening later, going back to that, the symbolism of Elvis in particular. And but the nature is that music becomes, it seems to me, more and more complex, and there are more and more things to play against. So if we think of rock and roll as being a 1950s invention, there was always this thought, well, how long actually would it last? And even famously, Mick Jagger being interviewed by Michael Parkinson and suggesting, oh well, we might survive for about 3 months or whatever. So there is that thing that actually there was an element of constantly building layers, like with trees with rock and roll, but that you move further and further away. And I'm not going to call it innocence because I don't think it was innocence, but you move further and further away from what was the initial essence. And I think it's really, really difficult to go back to that. You might hark back to it, and you might wish to go back to it. And I guess that the Japanese characters in particular, that's the essence that they're trying to tap back into, isn't it? That
Mm.
what it
Well,
was,
yeah.
what it was at the start of it that made it what it still people crave. They still crave that Elvis that Elvis look of that time.
Well, yeah. Whether rock and roll was a bit rude or a bit bawdy, as in Bawdy,
Yeah.
it was pure and it was honest.
Mm.
In obviously purity, honesty. didn't last.
No.
And by the 80s, purity and honesty sort of like is languishing mainly, apart from BU2, in the alternative punk and indie scenes
I mean,
rather than
if rock
mainstream.
and
So
roll became Shawaddy Waddy and Shakin' Stevens, there was a problem.
it's a very good point. If you'd actually made Mystery Train in Macclesfield with Shaking Stevens as the guru of rock and roll, I'm not sure it'd be a great film.
I mean, there are two bits of great casting. Well, more than two bits of great casting, but to have Joe Strummer in a film at all was pretty inspired, wasn't it, by a director?
Well, he's very good. He plays a completely screwed up Brit
Mm,
who's upset about his girlfriend,
mm,
although you can hardly blame her for ditching him because he seems to be a completely unreliable, slightly dangerous character
yeah,
who drinks way too much.
yeah.
And he's just perfect at it. He's got that edge. He's believable as a maudlin but edgy drunk.
I'm trying to remember what
Really
accent he
good.
used in it. Just his own, I think, didn't he?
Yeah, just his own. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, the other, I think, one of the great American character actors, Steve Buscemi.
Mm. Oh yeah. Well, as I said already, for 15 years, every decent or not decent, but every very good
Mm.
indie American film had Steve Buscemi in
Exactly,
it.
exactly. He was
The
compulsory,
guy
wasn't
was
he?
amazing. Even like eventually it became successful because Fargo, the Coen Brothers film from
Yes,
'96,
yes,
he was a big part of that film, and that was
yes,
a huge
exactly.
hit.
Yeah.
And Fargo is basically influenced by Jarmusch anyway.
Mm.
And then Ghost Dog comes along in 1999 that
Yeah,
Jarmusch has made with Forrest Whitaker.
yeah,
And Ghost Dog's a sort of like twisted version of the Coen Brothers, and
yeah,
you can see that Jarmusch leads the Coen Brothers. Coen Brothers then sort of influenced Jarmusch back.
yeah.
It's sort of a virtuous cycle, producing great alternative films, at least for a while.
Do you think
That
Steve
all started to
Buscemi's
erode in
do
the
you think
noughties.
Steve Buscemi's underrated?
Yeah, he's a bit like Harry Dean Stanton. I mean,
Good
until
call.
Paris,
Yes.
Texas, which was his probably his only starring role in a big
Yeah.
film,
Mm.
he was always the sideman and the supporting actor, and
Mm.
everybody thought he was good, but he was never a star. And and I think Buscemi's the same thing. Everybody loves
Is
him
that
because
where
he's
Jesse
right.
Plemons is now?
Exactly, exactly. And I don't think you break out of that once you're a character actor.
Mm.
You're sort of trapped there, especially if you look a little bit. Buscemi looks a bit goofy, and once you look a little bit goofy in your character actor, that's about it. A few character actors do become stars, like Gene Hackman is essentially a character actor, but he's a star, he's a leading man.
Yeah.
But he's one of the few examples of that.
I was trying to remember the series that Buscemi made not that long ago, where he looked really stylish. Now this
Was
was
he in Boardwalk
that's it,
Empire?
that's
Yeah,
it,
I thought so.
Boardwalk Empire. So
Mm.
that was probably as high profile as he got in more recent times.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But anyway,
So
Mystery Train's a fantastic film.
yeah,
It's when the Japanese tourists arrive at the beginning in the train, and the
yeah,
film ends with them leaving in the train. It's not really a journey to Memphis; it's a journey into the heart of rock and roll.
yeah.
That's what the film is.
Well, that's I guess what Memphis represents, isn't it? Jim
Mm.
Jarmusch, when would he have last made a film?
You know, he still makes films, and he sort of reached a peak. He got more commercial and became more high profile in the noughties. But having got to that high point, he seems to have slipped back a bit.
It's a wonderfully titled "The Dead Don't Die."
Mm. But the thing is that no film director in history has ever won a profile through doing very
No,
good movies
no.
and retained that same status for decade after decade after decade. All directors, no matter how good they are, their fortunes have peaks and troughs.
Mm.
And
Broken,
some directors' troughs are quite shallow,
yeah.
but it's still a trough.
Coffee and cigarettes. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was quite good, but he started to become so popular that every cool musician and actor or even comedian
Mm.
in the Western world wanted to be in his films, and he started to pack his films with with famous faces, which in the long run probably wasn't a good idea.
No, no, and of course, yes. Just looking through, just remembering these. Broken Flowers, which of course, again, absolutely. So you got Don Johnston in
Excellent.
that film,
That was good. That
and
was
Bill
good.
Murray in that film. So it absolutely backs your
Yeah,
point about having become
but
celebrity
that's quite a while
casting.
back. That's 20 years ago. That film.
Yeah. Yeah, so it looks like 2019, most recent one that gets mentioned.
Mm.
So maybe he's underrated in his own way.
Yeah, I think in the long run he'll be highly rated if anybody's still interested in cinema at that point.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a long time since I've seen one of his films. I saw
Exactly.
Broken Flowers. I think would be the last one I saw. Saw
That's a
Coffee
long
and
time ago, Charles.
I honestly think that's the last film of his I saw.
Mm.
So, Graham, I feel it's time for an interruption on this stormy night.
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you the story of when I went to see Field Music on their just finished British tour.
Yes.
And myself and my music chums, including the great James Littlewood,
Hmm.
rather than going to see Field Music at the Bruden in Leeds, like you would expect us to do, because it's quite close to us,
Yes.
we decided to surprise the band by going to Carlisle.
So that's
we're,
about
we're, we're,
as far north as you can go without being in
well,
Scotland.
exactly. Yeah. I'd never actually been inside Carlisle before, and they were playing the old fire station, which we were told was a good venue, good indie arts
Hmm.
venue. And
Hmm.
we came up with this hilarious idea literally 7 months ago that
Yeah.
we would go to Carlisle, would stay overnight in a hotel, and would surprise Field Music at the gig by turning up in Carlisle. Because we did it once before, we went to see them at Pop Rex, a great venue in Sunderland
Oh
a
yeah.
couple of
Yeah.
years ago. And they were surprised we turned up. So we thought, well, we'll have a sequel to that original hilarious gag
Yeah.
by going to Carlisle. So indeed, we did do it. We got the tickets. We drove to Carlisle.
Hmm.
It was a Monday night. We hit the streets of Carlisle on a cold Monday night, and everywhere was pretty damn empty. You know, like a bit of a ghost town. Quite
Hmm.
nice, but a bit of a ghost town.
Hmm.
Had a few drinks. Thought we'll have a meal before the gig, before we surprise Field Music, the Brewers brothers, Peter and David.
Yeah.
And we booked an Italian restaurant, although booking definitely wasn't required on a
No.
Monday night. So we booked an Italian restaurant, and we just sat down and ordered something to eat.
Yeah.
And we looked up, and who walked into the restaurant to sit down to have a meal
But the
but
Brewers
Film
brothers.
Music? So our hilarious gag had been blown before we even got to the gig.
Well, that's a shame, but I'm sure they were delighted to see you. Did you end up sharing a table?
No, because they had like various people there as well. So
Ah,
we
fair enough.
didn't snub them, they didn't snub us, but we just carried on eating and drinking. And it was a great performance and a great
Mm.
show by Field Music. So it was worth the journey. It's always worth the journey when you go to see Field Music. They're
Yeah.
much more entertaining and fun live than on record.
Quick quiz question for you, Graham. What is Carlisle most famous for?
I'm not going to get this one. Carlisle's not the sort of town that people talk about. I've never had anybody in my life ever say to me, "Have you heard what's happened in Carlisle?" So yeah, I know virtually nothing about Carlisle, except I know it has got a lot of history.
Well, my recollection, and I think this is correct, is that Charles II signed to return the country to being run by a monarchy. I think he signed that off in Carlisle.
I mean, do you actually remember that happening, Charles? Because that's quite a long time ago.
I mean, obviously, I wasn't there, which
Yeah, 17th century,
might
obviously. Yeah.
shock everyone. But I seem to recall when I can't remember why I visited Carlisle. There was some reason for it, and I do seem to recall that that was the thing that was the most significant thing that had ever happened in Carlisle.
Well, 2BEOs prides itself on being up to date and modern. So that's a great
I've,
bit of information.
I've got no up to date information on where's the best
Th-
pub to
This
go to
news
in
just
Carlisle, where's the
yeah.
best Italian restaurant that you don't need to book for in Carlisle, what the old fire station was before it became a venue, which is quite clearly obvious. It was the old fire station. I've got no revelations I can help you with really on Carlisle, I'm
But you
afraid.
have got hot news from the 1600s, so that's useful.
Yeah, yeah. So Graham, this week, during this last week, there's been a Harrogate International Festivals event, uh, as you describe it, a talking event, and this is meeting the Marxist rock writer Toby Manning. Um, and the good news, actually, for us on here on Two Big Egos is that Toby Manning has agreed to be a guest in a future edition, which is wonderful news. So, Graham, where was this event? Why was it happening? Has he written a new book that was being discussed? Tell me about this.
Well, it's quite fortuitous because Berwyn's Salon North, which
Oh,
is
yes.
held most months
Yes.
of the year, has been for quite a long time now.
Yeah.
takes place at the Crown Hotel, where Alan Bennett famously set one of his plays.
Yeah.
Well, it's been going for a long time because it's a northern offshoot of the London Salon,
Yes.
which was set up by Helen Bagnall
Mm.
a decade ago
Mm.
and is really popular. And so Harrogate's the only place outside London to have the salon. And the salon's basically a modern version of your old fashioned 18th, 19th century London public houses where writers and scientists and philosophers would meet for a coffee or a beer and
Yeah.
chat about progress in modern society. It's that sort of idea. And
Mm.
I'd never been before, mainly because I'm too busy. Also, being me, I always reckon, like, what am I going to learn? And I know most things already. It's not going to, what's the point?
What's
But I
the
went
point?
along because I hadn't been before.
Well, I have exposed your lack of knowledge of Carlyle, Graham. So there's still room to
Yeah,
learn more.
Carlisle's not really a salon discussion point.
Salon too
Anyway,
far
so I thought
north.
I
Yes.
was invited along by the sponsors, so I went along to the top table. It was all very nice, but one of the guest speakers, they have three guest speakers,
Mm.
and there's Q&A as well. And one of the guest speakers hadn't been able to turn up, so Toby was booked at the last minute. And he came
Ah.
up from London to talk about his new book, which is called Mixing Pop and Politics, a Marxist history of popular music. And you know how popular Marxism is these days. The
Yeah.
Marx Brothers are more popular than Marxism. So the title of the book is quite serious. And I chatted to him afterwards, and he said he wasn't, he'd been put under pressure to remove the Marx from the title because obviously he wanted to sell
Blowing
some
the whole
copies.
point of the book.
Yeah, but he stuck to his guns, so good on him. And
I mean,
but he was
on one level, it is off-putting. I get that, but on the other
yeah,
hand, it hits the marks, and that's what it's supposed to do. So,
hilarious challenge, yeah. But he was really good because he was entertaining. He had a slideshow and audio clips. So as he was going through his Marxist interpretation of popular music from the 1950s to the present day, he'd have little audio clips and he'd have little pictures and stuff. And he himself was hugely articulate. He's got a great command of the English language and very incisive descriptions of the
mm,
meanings of music. He gave you a potted history of rock music in a very fluid, entertaining style. I was completely bowled over by how good he was.
mm,
But on top of that, I mean, I do similar sort of things at vinyl sessions for
sure.
Harrogate Hospital charity, but he's really good. And also, as he started to talk, I thought if he's going to talk about Marxist interpretations of pop music, in terms of the lyrics, he's going to pick Eddie Cochran's "Summertime Blues" because
Yeah.
the lyrics of that are really extraordinary about American society and politics
Yeah.
in the 1950s. And lo
Mm,
and behold, that was about the first one he did was Eddie
mm,
Cochran's "Summertime Blues,"
yeah.
and I thought he's bound to do Billy Bragg. It won't just be the Clash and the Sex Pistols
No.
or the Rolling Stones.
Sure.
He's bound to do Billy Bragg, and he finished with Billy Bragg. I thought great, and then one of my favorite all-time tracks is Don Henley's "Boys of Summer" from about I don't know 84, 85.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not a huge Don Henley fan. I know he
No, but
wrote some
that's a
good songs for the
glorious track.
Eagles,
Mm,
but in general, Don Henley means nothing to me. But Boys of Summer is a brilliant track.
mm.
And what happened during Toby's talk? He highlighted Don Henley's Boys of Summer. And I thought, God, we're completely in the same wavelength
So
here.
tell me, Graham, why would that be a Marxist song?
Well, what he did is that the thing about Marx is that there's Marxism as in terms of how you interpret how society and the
Yeah.
economy and politics works,
Yeah.
and there's Marxist politics in terms of actually trying to change society and politics and trying to have a revolution. He
Yes.
wasn't talking about it specifically in trying to have a revolution. So it was about looking at how pop music and rock and roll was influenced by society and politics,
Mm,
and how even songs which weren't explicitly political, and most rock and roll is not explicitly political,
no.
even those songs reflected the politics of the time and have a political meaning that goes beyond the surface. So that's what you were saying, which I do agree with because I think popular culture subconsciously reflects the era it's
It has to.
in a very detailed fashion.
It has to do that. I mean, I get
Mm.
frustrated that there isn't as much directly political songwriting as I think there should be. And there hasn't, and I'm constantly going about where the hell are the great political songs of this age. And it's interesting that he finished with Billy Bragg, which is actually rather a long time ago, Graham. So did he, I'm interested to know, did he find any Marxism amongst the musicians of today?
No, No, not really, but it's not really about Marxism. It's more about politics and social things. It's not strictly it has to be have some Marxist links. That'd be ridiculous. It'd be a very small, boring book. It's way broader than that. It's about scraping away the surface of the song to
Yeah.
show you what it actually means below the fact it's a pop song and it's a rock and roll song. And I
I'd
completely
be
bought
interested to know
into
what
that.
Don Henley thinks of what his interpretation is.
Well, it mentions Grateful Dead
Mm.
in Boys of Summer, and
Mm.
he's looking back to better times, and it's about the end of innocence,
Yeah.
and the Grateful Dead represent the idealistic past, and the Grateful Dead were picked on by the establishment
Yes, they
and
were. Yeah.
were themselves an anti-establishment band.
Mm.
So in that one little line, a Don Henley pop hit of the mid 1980s, with it's quite a glossy track, although it's quite a very poignant track.
Mm.
That's already got political rock and roll history in those lyrics in passing, without there being any great attempt by Don Henley to write a political song. And that's what Toby Manning successfully drew out
Did he
in his
mention the Gang
talk,
of
in which he
Four?
draws out his book. What's that?
Did he mention the Gang of Four?
No, that was too specific. He's trying to not. I mean, I'm sure the book is 600 pages long,
Yeah.
so I'm sure that that'll pop up in the book. But in his 15, 20-minute slot
Yeah.
in Berwyn Salon, North and Harrogate,
Mm.
he was doing a quick race through the subject,
Yeah.
and he didn't want to linger on the obvious things like The Clash and Public Enemy
Yeah.
and Gang of Four. He wanted
Yeah.
to show how all pop is a degree influenced by politics and society. That was what he's trying to do.
Yes, and I think you can make a case for that. I think it's a little bit harder to do that with certain pop acts who I think have got absolutely no politics about them whatsoever.
Yeah, but even in not having politics to their political, so Wham, they had that DHS rap as one of their early songs,
Mm.
and then Young Guns Go For It.
That was a
Wham,
political song. That was a political song. Yeah.
Wham represented the aspirational, uh, hopeful,
Yeah.
positive, optimistic side of yuppie culture
Yeah.
in the Thatcher Reagan era.
Hmm.
I'm sure that's what Toby Manning would say. Well, he didn't mention Wham in the talk. And it's true, Wham did represent all that. So even in not being a political band, Wham were still political.
Yeah. Spice Girls.
Well, I suppose a little bit of like a reaction to lads culture and Britpop, a little bit of modern feminism,
Hmm.
and again, a little bit of like Blair era optimism about how you can be successful but still be
Mm.
good at the same time.
Mm.
I mean, good as in morally good. They were quite a positive force, Spice Girls. They weren't negative. They weren't really about sex. They were about, girl. They literally were about girl power.
Girl power.
So
Yeah.
that could only have happened in the Blair era in Britain.
Madonna.
Madonna was very marketing led, very
Mm.
advertising, very
Hmm.
money,
Hmm.
very ambitious, very. She was like the rebirth of 80s yuppieism, except
Mm.
with feminism chopped in, and
Mm.
also openness about sexuality and gender.
And religion.
Yeah, religion as well. Yeah, yeah.
So actually,
See,
I
it
mean,
all work.
there are all
Yeah.
issues that you could argue are political issues and certainly cultural and social issues. Yeah, yeah, we're making a case for an awful lot of bands that would apply to.
Anyway, I talked to him afterwards. I said, like, have you read
Mm.
John Stewart's Dylan, Lennon, Marx and God, which came out in 2021 on Cambridge University Press?
Yeah,
And he said he hadn't. And we talked about that book on this podcast a couple of years ago.
we did.
It's a very good book, but it's quite academic and dry
Mm.
because John Stewart, as well as being guitar player from Sleeper and Wedding Present, is an academic.
Mm.
And Toby isn't an academic. Well, he actually is. He does do some academic work as well, but he's much more literary and entertaining than John Stewart. So I'm going to get the book Mixing Pop and Politics: A Marxist History of Popular Music, which is published by Repeater.
Repeater.
Don't repeat it.
I don't know Repeater.
I've never heard of Repeater either, but
Mm.
there you go. It exists. So anyway, Toby opened the show at some point next month or two, which will be good. But
Excellent. Well,
next week we have
we shall
Gary
look out for
Stewart.
that.
Next week we have Gary Stewart as our guest, who
We do.
does a fabulous Paul Simon on his Graceland
So,
album.
Graham, where is he? And he's doing a solo show, by the way, in New York around about March the 8th. He's playing at Rise, which is the Bluebird
Yeah,
Bakery. So he's doing that as well. So where's he doing the Paul Simon show, the Graceland show?
it's coming to Harrogate Theatre.
Excellent, good.
Mm.
So we look forward to chatting with Gary Stewart next week. That will be excellent. I feel it's time for a second interruption, Graham, and then we might look at BAFTAs.
Well, I thought I'd show off because I like to talk about what I'm reading about because
Yeah,
these are books I think the audience needs to hear about. Well, I'm currently reading three books simultaneously, which I think you'll agree is very
three
impressive.
books spread out across the Charmer's table at once. That's a miracle.
And the three books are, and I know you want to hear this, Charles,
Number
Beyond the Wall.
one.
Yeah, book number one, Beyond the Wall, East Germany, 1949 to 1990 by Katja Hoyer on Penguin, which
Hmm.
came out in 2023.
Yeah.
R.D. Laing's The Divided South,
Oh yes.
which came out in 1960,
Yeah.
and Living the Beatles Legend, The Untold Story of Mal Evans by Kenneth Womack, which came out in 2023. So that's Beatles, psychiatry, and the history of East Germany all going on at the same time.
Well, you see, we did our 5 minutes in East Germany bit, didn't we? So I've been
Yeah,
curious
well, the book by
curious ever
Katja, which
since.
got rave reviews. We were in Berlin for one night when it was still East Germany. It still
Yeah.
had the border guards,
Yeah.
and it was brilliantly miserable. It was so miserable. I sat out in Berlin in November, the week that the wall started to come down, that we
Yeah.
actually, after about 2.5 hours, turned back to the west
Yeah.
because it was really tedious. So the point of Beyond the Wall is that her history is showing that East Germany was better than the press it got. It wasn't as miserable as we thought it was.
Mm.
And in general, East German people got quite a lot of that dictatorship. It wasn't all stick. There was some carrot. So
Yeah.
that's our argument in the book.
So I I mean to read three books at once, Graham, that is quite challenging. You're going to have a confluence of ideas at the end of all this. Are they going to feed off each other?
Well, there's not many links between the Beatles and East Germany.
This is what I'm
And
thinking. They played in West
yeah,
Germany famously. Yeah.
hmm.
Hamburg.
There are links between the Beatles and R.D. Laing because he was the Glaswegian psychiatrist who
Yeah.
basically came up with a lot of ideas that fed into the counterculture and
Yeah.
the hippies in the 1960s. So, for example, one of his big conclusions in his analysis of the nature of sanity and madness
Mm.
was that in an insane world, and you got to remember the 1960s with the Vietnam War,
Yeah.
a lot of people, especially people who were liberal,
Yeah.
thought the world had gone crazy and American policy was
Mm.
complete lunacy in Vietnam. So his argument was that in an insane world, the madman isn't mad. You would have to be mad not to be mad in an insane world. And that insanity isn't an individual's physiological problem. Insanity is linked to how society behaves and how the individual interacts and is affected by society. And all those sort of ideas ended up influencing the counterculture and hippie ideals in the 1960s.
Mm.
There is a link there to the Beatles because the Beatles were eventually a countercultural band.
Yeah.
In fact, helped to create the counterculture in the first place.
Absolutely. Well, we look forward to Graham if you want to return to those subjects later. So we haven't yet touched on the BAFTAs, which of course was a week ago, basically. And the big story I thought that came out of that was Conclave's victory and where that quite leaves it in terms of where it might stand for winning an Oscar or not. I confidently predict that America is so obsessed with America at the moment and so inward looking at the moment that it's more likely to go for a film that's rooted in America. And
Yeah, but what would that film be, Charles? There's not many contenders.
well, Honora and both Honora and Brutalist would be looking at America.
You think, they're hardly going to be Trump's favorite films, though, I would have thought.
I'm not sure that that's the point I'm making is that if America's looking in on itself, even
Hmm.
even the discomfort between the creative world and the world of Trump, the destructive world of Trump, I still think if America's doing navel gazing, I've got a feeling they just might go for that.
I think you got a point because will the Americans really vote for a film about the Pope? if it was a film about the Pope from the 13th century,
Yeah.
maybe, but it's about modern day
Mm,
political intrigue
mm,
in the Vatican. That's
mm.
not a sort of subject that usually wins loads of Oscars.
No, no. Even though it's a brilliantly made film, superb performances, brilliant script, wonderful cinematography, I thought it was absolutely the right choice. I mean, I think it's been so far an outstanding year for films. The latest of which, have you seen September the 5th yet, Graham? As a matter of interest.
No, I heard it's good, but I know quite a lot about the subject, so I'm a
Yeah.
bit worried that I'm just going to sit there and nitpick it as I'm watching it.
Well,
What did you think?
you could nitpick, and of course, right at the end, it says some of these characters are fictional, and some of these situations that are being described. And it's one of those ones again. You think, well, this is such an amazing story.
Mm.
Why do you still need to fictionalize things? I do find it odd that that has to happen. I get that sometimes you might conflate characters and things, but I always wonder why if the material's so good in the first place, why then
Well,
in it fictionalize certain elements and characters? I mean, I can understand if certain characters aren't allowed to be in it because of certain reasons. Maybe that happens. Real people, the families are saying no, can't have them in the story. But on the other hand, inventing characters always seems a bit odd in these things when you're actually doing a story that's absolutely rooted in the truth of what happened.
my theory is that the people who write film scripts in general, although there are exceptions, do not spend 6 months to a year analyzing the history of the subject they're writing
Mm,
about in
mm,
great detail.
mm,
They get the general summary of what happened. They
yeah.
then fictionalize the summary
Mm,
to create a dramatic curve that'll make it a hit Hollywood film. I
yeah.
think that's how they behave in general. There are rare occasions where that is not the case, but I just don't think that script writers for films,
Mm,
especially big films, do all that research
mm,
because they probably correctly think that if I do 6 months of historical research in a library,
yeah.
how much of that's going to end up in the film? Hardly any, because it's
I,
only
I
a
can
2 hour
understand
film.
that, and actually, the arc of a film's emotions. Um, this is a film that holds you from the start to the finish. Your heart is
Mm.
pumping and racing from the very start in this film. We've already had the film Munich, of course, telling this story of the hostages in the Israeli camp of the Olympic
Munich Olympics
athletes.
1972.
And it's telling the story from the point of view, actually, of the journalists, the sports journalists from
Mm.
ABC, who happened to be the nearest to the building where the hostage taking happened. And I mean, it is. I think it's really interesting to take that perspective on it and the responsibility of journalism. And it was the first time actually that live events, as were happening there, had been covered in that way by media, and 900 million people watched a live event like that. I mean, I
Mm.
think we had famously, I think was it Apollo, which was the one that had to, they didn't think which Apollo was the one that wasn't going to return. Was that Apollo 11? I think it was, wasn't
That
it?
was 13, wasn't it?
Which anyway, whichever one was a film made
Yeah.
about. And again, of course, there'll be things there
Yeah.
which are fictionalized, of course, within that story. But it does look at that thing of what are your responsibilities as journalists, and particularly if you're filming live. And there's sudden the realization in this film is that actually it looked like uh, the Black September group were actually watching the television screens and were watching the news themselves. So suddenly is that thought, gosh, we're influencing things as much as they are here. So I thought, as a journalistic exercise, I thought it was really, really well done. And just the extraordinary horror of that story, and the fact that also what came across really, really strongly is just how ill prepared or underprepared German police were to deal with the situation, but also
Well,
their situation that they were on show to the world for the first time since 1945 in a significant way. And I'm not talking sort of Eurovision Song Contest way, but something on a global scale that they just didn't want to get wrong.
yeah, but that was the era of hijacking. Planes
Yep.
were always being hijacked.
Yes.
Street demonstrations, the
Yeah.
occasional political assassination by
Yeah.
left-wing radicals.
Yeah.
But it was not an era until then of holding athletes hostage
No.
at a sports event.
No.
That's why it was a shock because
Mm,
it wasn't the sort of thing that normally happened.
no. No. We
And I
we
can
would
remember,
well
I
we can
remember it
remember
happening
something
as a
like
kid.
Patty. We can remember something like Patty Hearst, of course, being kidnapped a bit from in that era.
Yeah,
And I think, yeah, that was, and I mean, I was what in 1972. I was what 10 years, 11 years old, and I do remember watching it live. I do remember that, and
Yeah.
it was one of the, the horror of the situation, and that comes
Yeah,
across
well,
really,
everybody was
really
rooting for the
strongly.
hostages.
Yes,
Everybody was hoping to get out
yes,
alive.
yeah, yeah. So I think again, in this year of I think really strong films so far. That's my latest recommendation is September the 5th.
Does it make the journalists out to be heroes? Because I don't really like
No,
journalists looking like
no,
heroes a lot of the
no,
time.
it's not doing it like that. No, it's
Oh,
not,
that's good.
because actually the dilemma that plays out in the story is what they're hearing. Is it true? Is it or not? Are they being rightly informed or wrongly informed? And then
Mm,
the implications if actually the information is wrong, what subsequently happens. So no, they're not making out that the journalists are heroes in any way at all. It is that thing of actually it's showing the dilemmas they were facing, and also the desire to want to be telling the truth, and then when misinformation happens and the consequences of that. So it's not about
mm.
journalistic bravery. It's not putting that way at all. It is pretty well matter of fact about what was happening, and also what went wrong in more ways than one. So it's not about heroism. It is, I think, it's about experiencing situations that no sports journalists would ever have faced before, and how do you deal with a story that's rolling at the time? How does that play out, both as a news exercise, but also as the way it's played to the world, who equally would not have been used to information being shown to them. News live in a 24 rolling hours way now has become the norm. Not then, it
Yeah.
wasn't. Not
At
then,
the
it
same
wasn't.
time, the journalists were aware that this was a great story for them because
There is that.
most journalists are like that. But I remember like one of the Harrogate International journalists was in Manhattan when Twin Towers 9/11 happened.
Mm,
And I managed to track him down via his mum to
mm,
phone him up to try and get him to write a story because he was actually there.
yeah.
And he said, I can't possibly write a story. I'm too overwhelmed by the events.
Mm,
If I write a story, I won't be human anymore.
yeah.
And I thought that was going a bit too far, but I could understand where he's coming from because he was a human being first and a journalist second.
Yeah, I think he was wrong.
Well, yeah, I think he should have filed the story, but
I think he should.
he
I
should
think he
have
could have
done it
said.
in
I
a
think he could have said within a story how he felt. That's what he
yeah.
wanted. That's what he wanted to hear.
And if he wanted to help, he could have gone down to the site
Of
and
course.
actually helped pull away the debris because
Yeah.
obviously the place was a mess.
I'm not one to say, look, I haven't faced a situation like that, so how can I possibly know how he would have felt? I don't know how he could have felt, but actually, I think all of that and I'm not even calling it a journalistic exercise. It's a response as a human being to what one's seen. I think that the nature of journalism is to want to do that.
Well, you want to be a witness of history,
Yeah,
and this was definitely a moment of
I
history,
don't think
even
that's
though it was a
and I
terrible
don't
moment.
think it's voyeurism. I really don't.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub production.